What's up guys, and welcome back to another video. Yes, you know what time it is. Yes, there was a new game announced and thus I am here in the mood to make a video, and thus that's what I'm going to do. So unless you are living under a rock or just haven't seen the Pokemon Presents yet, you will know we have some new games on the way and some fairly interesting things to talk about regarding them. So this video I'm going to go over the two Diamond and Pearl remakes, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. So we'll have a look at what's been revealed so far, talk about what might be revealed in the future, and just have a general chat about that, and give a few opinions, because these aren't, I guess, your standard remakes, or at least the remakes we are used to. So initially, let's look at the names. Is the first thing. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I can't say they are the most amazing names. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire were definitely sort of a little bit, they fit a bit better, especially when it came to then building into the games with the different orbs and the Omega symbol and the Alpha symbol and so on and so forth. Whereas when it comes to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, obviously it makes sense in terms of, yes, they are both gems, and a diamond can be brilliant because it shines brightly, or that sort of thing, and similarly a pearl can shine. But in terms of the names of the games, they just don't sort of hit quite the same way. I also don't like how the abbreviated form will be BDSP. It just doesn't sit right with me, thanks. There have been many different names thrown around in the past for the remakes. Of course, people have been excited for them and thinking about them for years. Stuff like Temporal Diamond and Spatial Pearl. Those sort of very obvious and very straightforward names. But I can't say that the actual names fit better than any I've heard in the past. So that's just my personal opinion, though. Feel free to let me know if you think they are amazing names. But move on to the actual games themselves, past their names. So, as I say, they are not the straightforward remakes we've seen in the past. Of course, thinking back about to the remakes we've had obviously Fire Red Leaf Green with the first set, then we had Heart Gold Soul Silver, and then finally Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. And I suppose the common thing about those is that they were in the same style as the other game they were alongside. So Fire Red Leaf Green was in the same style as Ruby and Sapphire, Heart Gold Soul Silver same style as Diamond Pearl Platinum, and obviously then Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire same style as Diamond and Pearl, in terms of obviously built off of the same engine and that sort of thing there. Whereas these games here are not in the same style as Sword and Shield, which is sort of what people would have been expecting. They're also not quite in the same style as the Let's Go games were, which people probably would have sort of warmed to a bit more. It's a very different style, I suppose. It's the bottom line, and it's more a chibi style. And obviously this is because, or at least maybe partially related to the fact that these games are not being developed by Game Freak. They're being developed by a separate company, obviously under sort of the control of the Pokemon Company and so on, but it's not in Game Freak's sort of control, I suppose, or at least as much as a normal game would be. So that may be why the style is slightly different. It might not be the only reason, of course, because I can't imagine the Pokemon Company would have told this company to by the way, make a game. I don't really care how you make it, just make it. It's not going to have been their decision. Either the Pokemon Company is going to have worked with them and bounced ideas back and forth, and then decided that actually this is the style I like best, or it would have been requested from the Pokemon Company in the first place to make a sort of more, I guess, cutesy or maybe more accurate remake, I suppose is the best term, because I guess Fire Red Leaf Green and Heart Gold Soul Silver were fairly accurate remakes in the fact that Gen 1, Gen 2 and Gen 3, Gen 4 were all working on the same tile-based system and that sort of thing, so doing a remake of it is fairly straightforward. It looks pretty much the same. Similar almost for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, since there was still a tile-based system in place there, even though it was sort of tracking more towards being free and open. Obviously Sword and Shield are completely free and open, and they don't use any obvious tile-based systems, so doing a Diamond and Pearl remake in that same format would have been obviously possible, but it may not have fit as nicely as the previous remakes in the past, so that might be why they've gone in this direction, to go back to a tile-based format and obviously build the art style around that. But we won't talk too much about it. My personal opinion, it's not a style I immediately look at and say this looks amazing, I love it. I'm sure it will grow on me, but there are some shots, some images that just don't quite look right in my eyes. So it's something I'll have to grow into quite possibly. Anyway, so the first couple of shots I've got here are obviously one of Dawn in her bedroom, and then finally Lucas, I suppose, in Twin Leaf Town. You can see the start of the game looks to be very similar to Diamond Pearl. It's normal with the red Gyarados, I think it is, playing on the television. She's got a Switch now, so she's upgraded that at least. And of course you can see Twin Leaf Town is looking just sort of exactly as we expected it to. Nothing too different going on there really. So the remakes here, they look to be fairly one-to-one is the term I would describe them. Whereas the Ruby and Sapphire remakes, and also the Fire Red Leaf Green remakes, and to an extent the Heart Gold Silver, although maybe a bit less there. Fire Red Leaf Green and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire definitely was straight away from the one-to-one a little bit. Obviously Fire Red Leaf Green added the Seville Isles, and it took a little bit more liberty there in changing up some stuff and adding some stuff. Whereas Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire added a load of stuff. Obviously Megas were a big part of that. Soaring, the Delta episode was added to the end of the game as well, so it wasn't sort of a one-to-one, whereas this does look like a one-to-one. And what I mean by when I say that is they basically have taken exactly what the games were in the first place and converted it into a different art style. Now then, there's probably stuff under the hood, and we'll talk about some of it later on, that may have changed, but for the most part it seems to be sort of here's the old games, let's put them on a new system, and let's rather than just port them, let's remake around them. So you can see a few screenshots here. You can see that the tile-based grass returning is obviously not like a proper area of grass like you would see in Sword and Shield. So the tile-based grass does return, as does basically everything related to the tile-based system with the individual character models and sprites and so on. And of course this is where the sort of the chibi style builds in here, because you can have the chibi characters representing sort of a one tile system, whereas if you were to make them full size characters, the tile based system may not look quite as good. But in these few shots here you can see a couple of routes off the top of my head. Also Route 201 is there, and possibly Route 202. I think that's probably the one, just judging by the trainer placed there and the grass, and there's a bit of grass to the right hand side at the bottom where Dawn or Lucas teaches you how to catch Pokemon and so on. So it's probably Route 202, and then obviously you've got Valley Windworks here, and you can see a few things to pick out. Drifloon's there, so Drifloon, the Friday spawn, is clearly going to return as expected. And there's also a honey tree, as you can see in the top right, just next to the entrance to Valley Windworks. So again, honey tree is returning in terms of slathering honey on and getting Pokemon attracted in that way. So hunting Munchlax will be interesting for sure. If we continue on and look at a little bit more and focus now actually on the battling, because obviously the chibi style has the biggest impact on the overworld. If we look at the two battle shots we have here, you can see they are using sort of fuller human models, similar to Let's Go most likely, and you can see that the models for the Pokemon are, as expected, the same sort of models we have in Sword and Shield, possibly lit in a different way. You can see the Lucas character model here doesn't really have any shading on him. He is sort of a full colour all the way across. There's no shadowing on the bag or on his clothing, so hopefully this is down to the game being earlier in development. It's not ready to be released yet. So hopefully this will improve. It does look a little bit sort of flat at the moment, so hopefully these are things that are just being worked on as we speak. But in terms of that, the battles seem to be as we'd expect them, and they look very similar to Let's Go in that way. So even though the overworld looks sort of greatly different, the battling is very similar. So obviously, as I mentioned a few times, our protagonists are the same. It's a straight remake, so we've got Dawn and Lucas joining us once again with pretty much no changes to their character design. They are using the character design from Diamond and Pearl rather than from Platinum. So remember, Platinum has slightly different character design there because the Sinnoh region has some general changes in Platinum with more snow across the region. And of course, they're wearing slightly warmer clothes, whereas obviously here we are stuck with the old and the OGs. Speaking of OGs, of course, your starter choice is going to be the same as it was back in the day with Turtwig, Chimchar and Piplup, so unchanged there. As you'd expect, really, it is a remake rather than anything else, and so a lot of things are going to be a case of, yep, that's what we expected. Similarly, Dialga and Palkia are going to be our two legendaries for the games, same as we had Groudon and Kyogre in Omega and Alpha Sapphire. Now, whether we will see anything similar to Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre remains to be seen. I would err towards the side of no, again, because it seems like a one-to-one remake rather than anything else. Whereas obviously Mega Ray Alpha Sapphire took a lot more liberty in soaring, primals, megas, etc. This looks to be a case of one-to-one. And since it is an external, I say external, I'm not entirely sure, different company developing the games, it sort of makes sense in that way that they would just sort of say, recreate this. It's the Pokemon Company's first sort of time giving a main series game over to a developer's not Game Freak, and thus they might be sort of playing on the side of caution to say, yeah, just do this for us and we'll see how you go. Maybe next time we'll give you a bit more freedom and say, you know, add some new stuff if you want to, that sort of thing. So that may be one of the factors as part of it, rather than, you know, expanding on certain things. Because of course up until this point, up until today basically, we were all sort of a little bit worried that they would just carry across Dynamax and Gigantamax into the Sinnoh region for these remakes, as they did with Megas in Generation 6. It hasn't turned out to be the case. It seems like we're not going to get anything added in terms of, you know, Dynamax to these remakes, but a lot of people were worried because it tends to be, yeah, that's how it worked for Auras at least. Let's carry across this new mechanic into the remakes, but it seems to be going a slightly different way here. So Dialga and Palkia likely will stay as they are. If we check out a few other screenshots just to pick it, you know, to touch on a few different things. Firstly, the Union Room looks like it's returning. So we have a shot here of the character, you know, blipping into the Union Room, which is used for trading back in Generation 6. Is it Generation 6? No, sorry, Generation 4. Definitely uses the Union Room, because obviously these are original games, and you can see there's quite a lot of people in there. But again, I assume that's, you know, just testing almost. So the question being here, how will the Union Room work online? I don't believe it worked online. When it came to the original games, it was just local, and of course there was online with the GTS, but that was completely separate. So online for these games may be interesting. It may be that the Union Room again stays just as local only, which means it's going to get very minimum use probably. And then obviously the GTS could return. Well, actually no, the GTS is not going to return, is it? Because it's part of home now, so it really makes zero sense for them to put them in the game. So we'll have to see, because obviously we still want to allow online battling, you know, and that sort of thing. So whether the Union Room will be sort of co-opted to you know, to use that with, and maybe it'll be like you have to enter a room code to enter the correct Union Room, because again, previously it was just local, so it just connected to things around you. If it's online, you're going to have some way to find people. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I imagine it'll be some sort of code-based system, since we are sort of following that pattern with the Let's Go trading using basically Pokemon codes, and then obviously Sword and Shield using some, you know, pin codes effectively to hook up for trading, battling, and the like. So we may see something here similar here for the Union Room in the remakes. Then we have the classic Dialga or Palgia, I don't know, statue in Eterna City. Now this in the original games was a sprite statue, of course, that could either be interpreted as a Dialga or a Palkia statue, depending on sort of what parts of the sprite you interpreted as legs or arms. Now they seem to have tried to recreate the same thing here, because the idea was it was the same sprite in both games, and thus it fit both games. One was Dialga, one was Palkia. Easy. They seem to have tried going for the same thing here, but it has not worked out at all. You can see it looks more like Dialga than Palkia, definitely. And the fact that it then seems to be standing on its hind legs more than its front legs just looks completely wrong for Dialga. So hopefully that changes for the release, because it looks really bad right now. Or they may keep it as like a little, you know, reference to the old days where they did have the sort of the sprite fitting both of them. But we'll see. And then finally, the last screenshot I've pulled up here is just obviously when you get your starter, or near enough to when you get your starter, when you first go to Lake Verity, and the bit I was most sort of, my eye was drawn to here was the water. And the water actually looks good for a Pokemon game. Like, you know, the Sword and Shield water still looks pretty flat. There's not too much to it, whereas this looks like proper water. You know, not proper water, but as close as you're going to get almost, with shading and stuff like that. So that's one thing that caught my eye. But you can see again Rowan and Dorna here at Lake Verity, so it seems like it will very much follow the Diamond and Pearl flow in terms of getting your starter there, as opposed to on Route 201 sort of by the grass, like it is in Platinum, which is what we expected almost. It's a remake of Diamond and Pearl rather than a remake of Platinum. However, Platinum did include a lot of stuff that improved Diamond and Pearl, so the question that's on a lot of people's lips is, how much of that improvement are we going to see in these remakes? If they're going to do a straight remake from Diamond and Pearl up to here, we are going to be missing a lot of stuff. Like, there was the problem with the fire types, of course there was hardly any of them. And yeah, I can't list them all, but Platinum did add and did change many things that were appreciated. So hopefully a lot of those are incorporated into this remake here, because otherwise it's just basically a regression on Platinum. So we will see. And in terms of the similar thing with Emerald, there wasn't too much from Emerald added to Oras in that way, because I don't think there was much difference between Ruby Sapphire and Emerald. There are a few changes, I think, to maybe the Pokénav in terms of rematching off the top of my head, but there wasn't a huge change like we see in Platinum with the Sinnoh decks getting basically a whole revamp with new Pokemon added, Pokemon made available earlier in the game, and so on. The original Diamond and Pearl lacked the ability to get a lot of the new Generation 4 Pokemon that were evolutions of pre-generation Pokemon, like Magmortar, for example, and Electivire. They weren't available until like post-game, which sort of defeats the purpose. So Platinum fixed that. So hopefully we'll see a lot of those fixes carried over into these remakes. But if we continue looking through, I've pulled up the web page, basically the website they've made for these games, and we're going to look at a few of the quotes from here. And you can see, talking about how it's being sort of a remake itself, they have stated the original story has been faithfully reproduced, so they're basically copying the story from Diamond and Pearl. So we can't expect any changes there. As I say, Oras had the changes with the red orb and the blue orb having a few changes with the primal reversion and so on, whereas here it seems like it's pretty much a faithful reproduction, nothing changing at all. And they've also said the census scale in the original's towns and routes have been carefully preserved, so again, fitting in with this chibi style and tile-based system, they are looking to like for like reproduce it. Whereas if they went for a sword and shield style, I guess some of that could be lost because we'd be very much in a different type of atmosphere. So seems like that's what they're going for there. So they're saying people who play for Diamond and Pearl can revisit familiar places and relive familiar scenes once more, and for those setting out for the first time, obviously it's the first time, so there's plenty for them to see. The next part I picked out to look at is the fact that they do then specify there are a few changes. These remakes include easy to understand, player-friendly conveniences of the modern Pokemon series, plus up-close and personal Pokemon battle scenes. So the first part is what we want to focus on there. Easy to understand and player-friendly conveniences of the modern Pokemon series. Now, the modern Pokemon series, let's assume they mean sort of Gen 7 and Gen 8. So what is in Gen 7, Gen 8 that wasn't in Gen 4? The first one that jumps out to me immediately is TMs. TMs back in Generation 4 was single use, and that was that. So Generation 5 was the generation or the set of games that changed that, and of course made them multi-use, and that was a huge benefit, because of course it was always a struggle back in Gen 4 and previously of, I've got a TM, okay, it's Flamethrower, who do I want to teach Flamethrower to? Oh, I'm not sure. Teach them one okay, and what if I switch them out off my team, especially for Nuzlocke, because that's the bad thing, because you don't want to use it too early in the game, because if your Pokemon then dies in the Nuzlocke, you then just lose that TM entirely, whereas if you leave it for too long, you're not getting any use out of it. So hopefully we'll see TMs change to be multi-use, as they did in Generation 5. If they don't do this, it's a simple change, of course. If they don't do it, it's just a complete waste, and it's going to make the games really sort of painful to play through, and will be a really big sort of notch in how good they could be. So hopefully, there are obviously a bit maybe concerns there where maybe it then gets the games become too easy, because you can reuse a TM a lot of times and put this powerful move onto all your Pokemon, and then the games are pretty easy, which is another a good criticism of the recent games anyway. With the ability to go Earthquake on everyone, it's a little bit of okay, well, it's a strong move, so it makes it a bit easy. Sword and Shield actually helped this slightly by splitting out TMs and TRs, where TMs tend to be the weaker, the status moves generally rather than anything else, whereas the TRs are then the proper hard hitters. But the point there is, while TMs are single use, you can easily get some more through raids and the like. Whereas obviously in the old games, you used TM once, that's it, it's gone. Sometimes you could only get one TM per save file, so that was a really just like, no thank you. So that's one thing that hopefully will change. Similarly, one of the things that might see a change, or hopefully will see a change, are HMs, because of course up until Sun and Moon, I suppose, HMs were a part of the game series, and were a bit of a pain in some cases because you had to carry around, in Diamond and Pearl instances, you had to carry around a Bidoof with Rock Smash, Strength, Surf, and Cut. Just to get through to all the areas whenever you wanted. And of course, Fly was another one because you had to always have a flying type Pokemon on your team, because otherwise it just becomes a pain running back and forth between the Pokemon centers and so on. So that was solved in Generation 7 with the Ride, or the Poké Ride and the Ride Pager, just allowing you to summon in Charizard or Tauros or whatever you needed to get past an obstacle or to fly to and fro. And was sort of removed even further in Sword and Shield by not really having any of these field obstacles, but having the Corviknight Taxi for the flying part. And similarly in Let's Go, you had Pikachu or Eevee who were able to do all of those actions, meaning you never had to put a Pokemon on your team. Now, whether they will change this for Diamond and Pearl remakes, it's not entirely clear. If you're talking about a faithful replication, then you wouldn't change them, because HMs were part of Diamond and Pearl. They were a pretty annoying part because there are quite a few. Let's see, Rock Smash, Rock Climb, Surf, Waterfall, Fly of course, Cut. So that there's a lot more in there than a normal game, I suppose, thanks to Rock Climb being introduced. Defog too, which is a real pain. So if you're doing a faithful replication, you have to leave that in, because that maintains the initial sense of playing the games. However, they were really quite annoying, so I think people would probably be more annoyed if they were left in than removed in favour of something else. Now what that something else could be, I couldn't tell you, because of course it's not Alola, there's no Ride Pager, and it's not Galar, there's no Corviknight Taxi or similar, so they can't remove it entirely, because, well, how are you going to remove the waterfalls and that sort of thing? So I feel like they're going to leave them in, but we will have to hopefully be surprised if we hear some more information later this year about how they're not being left in and how there is just a different way to go around it. So we'll see. Maybe your Pokédex is just going to get super powerful and able to smash rocks and give you a floating raft or something like that. Hopefully, who knows. The other part possibly to think about when it comes to player-friendly conveniences is when it comes to the viability of your Pokemon for competitive battles, of course. And this, of course, started back in Generation, was it 6, I think? Generation 6 introduced ability capsules, Generation 7 then introduced bottle caps, and then finally Generation 8 has introduced mints, allowing you to change the ability, maximise the IVs, or of course change the nature of your Pokemon using those 3 items. And of course we also have the ability patch in the Sword and Shield DLC, allowing you to give your Pokemon the hidden ability it has. So whether these will reappear, I mean, hopefully. I don't think there's any reason for them not to include them. If there's any sort of battling facility, they can just be purchasable there for BP and leave it there. So I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be included. And of course, it is a player-friendly convenience. And of course, I think if it wasn't included, again, it would be a bit of a regression of the series, because obviously they weren't in the original games. But the idea is to remake the games to modern standards, and including modern gameplay elements like this is sort of what it's all about. So hopefully we'll see them return. So it's just another thing we may have to grind for and get lots of BP for. So we'll see. Then picking out a couple more images just to have a sort of a final think about. We have one shot of the player in the underground, so the underground is returning. Again, what form this will be in is remains to be seen. Of course, underground in the original games was used for a couple of things. You can make secret bases in there, and also you could then go and excavate for fossils, shards, and plates, and other things like that. So, assuming both of those returning, excavation, as give you fossils. It could also give you bottle caps is the other thing as well. Thinking about what we've just been talking about, it's one way that you could be obtaining them there. So hopefully that will make a return and will be a fairly enjoyable mini game. Another thing to consider is then the online base making. Obviously in the original games you could make secret bases, but that was only local play. So how is that going to work online in these remakes? Are we assuming they're going to be online and not local only? Again, you could argue, well, if you're staying true to the originals, you don't add online play, but that's a little bit of you can't really do that. So let's assume they will. But again, it's a case of how do you manage who's in your underground and who can join your underground and visit your secret bases. Again, maybe it's some sort of room code, or maybe it's completely random and maybe you can invite friends and that sort of thing. We'll have to see how that goes. I'd guess a room code again, since that seems like their favourite approach, but we will see. And then the other screenshot I've picked out here is from the player at Snowpoint City at the docks. And the important thing here is you can see the non-player character in the bottom left of the screen. Now usually I believe he is the one who takes you to the fight area, which is the island sort of to the northeast of Sinnoh. Well, it's part of Sinnoh, but you know it's the northeast part of it. Of course that's after the Pokemon League is completed and gives you some sort of post-game content with a few different things. So it seems like that's returning. Hopefully it should return because it's part of the story, so it would be pretty strange for them to remove the whole section of the game. It is the whole post-game of Diamond and Pearl, so it sort of does need to return. So hopefully we will see that return and have such things like the Battle Frontier, which was in the base Diamond and Pearl games. Obviously for Oras we did not get a Battle Frontier. It was sneakily taken away from us, even though it was in Emerald. It should have been in those games, but it was not. But it is in the base games of Diamond and Pearl, so it makes sense. Again, faithful reproduction, it should be in these games, so fingers crossed for that one. So then let's think about one more thing before we wrap up. There's a lot of stuff still to think about here in terms of like deck sizes, different post-game content, online content. We've sort of skimmed over a few of this, but the last thing I'm going to be looking at is Legendary Pokemon. So there are quite a few Legendary Pokemon available in Diamond and Pearl. It was sort of the first generation, Generation 4, adding a few, or quite a few. Obviously, Generation 3 had your Latis, your Regis, and then your main trio with a few others. But Generation 4 was really where it sort of exploded out. Of course, we've got the default Legendaries in the Uxie, Mesprit, Zelf, Dialga, and Palkia. It's fairly straightforward how those are going to be obtained, exactly the same way as in the base games, but we'll skim over the other Legendaries just because some of them might be handled slightly differently. Heatran first up. Now Heatran is available in that fight area island in Stark Mountain, so assuming that returns, Heatran will again be available there because it's sort of part of the storyline in a way, at least in Platinum. So whether they will carry across that storyline from Platinum, we'll have to see, but he should be there. Regigigas is in Snowpoint Temple. Now bear in mind, in the original Diamond and Pearl games, there was no way to catch the Regis. They had to be transferred from Generation 3 to allow you to actually go ahead and catch Regigigas in the temple. Platinum did solve that by adding them, the free standard Regis obtainable elsewhere. So Diamond and Pearl remakes may follow this same idea of make the Regis obtainable somewhere in the games, or maybe you have to transfer them from Sword and Shield to be able to get Regigigas. So again, we assume he returns. It's just in what form. Do we allow them to catch Regigigas without actually having any Regis at all, or do they add them to the game, or do they again force you to transfer from elsewhere? The next one is Giratina. Now Giratina is slightly different because of course he is the focus of Platinum, whereas here we are losing him. So similarly, Emerald, the focus was Rayquaza, and he did appear in Oras, but the question was, well, is Giratina going to get the same sort of treatment? Now, if we're doing a faithful replication of Diamond and Pearl, he will be available in Turnback Cave in the post-game, as he was there in the original games, just available for capture. But they could change it slightly and make him available in the Distortion World, or maybe have the Turnback Cave available accessing the Distortion World, have some sort of standoff with him in there. Or they could do something similar to the Delta episode and have I don't know what sort of episode you would call it. We got Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, Sparkly Platinum, Sparkly episode, something like that, I don't know. They could do that. Again, they have said faithful reproduction, so that would mean Giratina's just going to be available there for capture. But there's nothing saying that he will definitely be like that, so we will have to see there. Then we have Cresselia. Cresselia probably will follow the same Diamond and Pearl obtain method, where she's on Full Moon Island and you go and see her and say hello, and then she goes off roaming and you just have to go and find her. So that's straightforward there. Moving on further, we then have the Mythicals that pop up. So first up we have Manaphy and Fiona. Of course, Manaphy originally was available through Pokemon Ranger interaction, where you got given the egg and then you could hatch the egg, and there was Manaphy. And of course you can then breed Fiona from Manaphy there. So how this will happen in the Diamond and Pearl remakes remains to be seen. Option 1 is just a straightforward mystery gift event at some point, which is boring. Option 2 is maybe again you sort of get given the egg in game, so rather than requiring Ranger or another external game, there's just an NPC that gives you the egg in the post game and you can then go and hatch it. It's another option. Or maybe a third one is there is some sort of external game interaction, but that seems very unlikely given we have no Ranger or anything similar to that. So Manaphy will be the most interesting, I think, because it's the most up in the air, that will have a completely different method of getting hold of it, so we'll have to see. Then we have Darkrai. Now, of course, Darkrai had an event in Diamond, Pearl, Platinum where you got a certain ticket, I think, or some sort of key, and thus you could go into it and have a small sort of story side mission, eventually culminating with getting a hold of Darkrai. So this may again happen in the same sort of way, where there's a mystery gift event to give you this ticket, and thus eventually we can go and get Darkrai. So this may be Generation 4 and Diamond and Pearl were the last games to do good mystery gift events, where you actually got given something that wasn't just here is the Pokemon, and you could actually go and do a little side mission. So hopefully they will replicate the same sort of structure as that, where maybe we don't get access to Darkrai as soon as the game's release, but after a few months we get this mystery gift and we can then go and catch Darkrai for ourselves there. Shaman is in a very similar bucket because he was also available through an event mystery gift that takes place in game. So again, hopefully we'll see the same sort of thing happening here, where we get given Professor Oak's letter and we can eventually get access to the Flower Paradise and catch ourselves a Shaman. So hopefully that happens, and hopefully we're not just shoved and told, yeah, it's Shaman, it's Darkrai, have fun. Hopefully we go back to the good old days and have a proper legendary or mythical event. And then of course the final mythical, the one we have not spoken about yet but we'll speak about more at length elsewhere, is Arceus. Now of course in the original games there was similarly a mystery gift event designed to allow you access to catch Arceus, and that was of course at Spear Pillar and then finally the Hall of Origin through the Azure Flute. This event was never actually distributed to anyone, I do not believe, and thus he was never actually catchable in game. He was just distributed through some subsequent mystery gift events. So the question is, what happens to Arceus in the Diamond Pearl remakes? Again, do we get a similar mystery gift event allowing us access to him, or not? Or does he not actually appear in the game at all? And the reason I say that one is because of course we have this third game here, Pokemon Legends Arceus, which we'll talk about more in a separate video since we're already half an hour into this one and that one almost warrants more discussion. But yes, he has his own game and presumably he will be catchable in that game. So the question is, do they also allow him to be catchable in the Diamond Pearl remakes? Or do they say, no, you can't catch this guy here, please buy another game for him? That's one option. Second option is there is some sort of in-game event, but it requires you to own Pokemon Legends Arceus. So what I mean by that is you get a sort of an extra gift for having the save file on your user. Similar to how in Sword and Shield, if you have a Pokemon Let's Go or Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu or Eevee save file on your user, you can claim the Gigantamax Eevee and the Gigantamax Pikachu from the train station. So maybe something similar happens here, where if you once it gets released of course, and you end up with this save data on your user, you can go back into the Diamond Pearl remakes and maybe get access to a exclusive event and be able to then go and catch Arceus in that game too. This is one possibility they may do. It sort of keeps the exclusivity locked behind this other game, but it also allows you to get an Arceus in the Diamond Pearl remakes themselves. Of course, the third option is they just put them in the game. Similar to Darkrai and Shaman, they can have the mystery gift distributed at some point or just available in-game from the start. Or you could even get some sort of Delta episode similar to Rayquaza. Of course, Rayquaza is not the equivalent of Arceus, it's Giratina. But they could give him the same sort of treatment because he is the god of Pokemon, so he sort of deserves something in the game. But we don't quite know because the game's already been announced today, so we'll have to find out in due course. So that's all the legendaries covered, and that's sort of where I was coming to a conclusion for this video. There is still a lot we haven't talked about. The Poketch, how is that going to work? What's the Pokedex going to look like? Are we going to have all the Pokemon Generation 1 to Generation 4? Are we going to have any later generation Pokemon in the games? Of course, Auras had everything, but that was in a previous time before we had Dexit. So that's one other thing to think about and question of. And of course, haven't even spoken about it, but the Poke Radar for shiny hunting. Now we're back to a tile-based system. It's not like we would have to struggle to find a way for the Poke Radar to work. So will they add the Poke Radar again? Will it be as frustrating as it was in the original games, or will they tweak it somehow to make it a little bit easier? All more questions to be answered. I may make future videos covering them, so if anyone would like to see something like that, do of course let me know down below in the comments, and I'll be happy to sort of think about it a bit more and craft some videos around those topics. As I mentioned, there is a third game here though, Pokemon Legends Arceus, revealed at the same time as these games, and I will likely be making a video on that one as well, because as I say, there's probably a lot more to talk about in that game than these two here, because these two are remakes and this game is completely new, and there's a whole world out there we could think about. So I will surely make a video on that soon, and we can get some discussion around that game going too. But for now, I'm going to sign off for today, guys. Do let me know your thoughts down in the description about the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes. I keep saying Diamond and Pearl remakes rather than Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, because I do not like the names. But let me know what you think of the names and the art style and anything else in the comment section below. Were you happy with the reveal, or would you prefer a sword and shield type game for these remakes? Let me know in the comment section, and yeah, that'll be it from me for today. I hope you're all doing well, but for now, see you guys next time. Goodbye, my friends.